Hey there, Zlatko here. Welcome to What is My Brain podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I get the opportunity to chat with fellow founders and business operators about their journey and how they got to where they are now, where they are going, and how they're going to get there. I'm planning on bringing guests and touching on topics such as running multiple businesses, executing ideas, and just spitballing about random topics and current events. It's a casual conversation, and that will hopefully bring value to anyone that decides to listen. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in.
All right,
Cool.
we're live.
We're live, Nathan. Thanks so much for joining the podcast, and thanks for willing to be on it. You and I exchanged a few emails, and then we never got to talk on a video till about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So pleasure having you on, man. I'm loving everything you guys are doing over at Growth Machine. I know you and I talked about personal brands and stuff like that. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Let the people know what you do, how you got here, where you are, where you started, and where the fuck you're going, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to give the overview, and it's nice to be able to get on a second call with you already after such a long time before the first one. So, yeah. So I'm head of sales and new client strategy at Growth Machine. So my day-to-day role over there is talking to anybody that potentially we'll be working with. So whether that's new inbound leads that are coming through, people that get referred over to us, doing outreach, I'm kind of the engine that drives everything that's coming in. So a lot of talking to people. It's fantastic. I love it because I get to talk to all sorts of great people, yourself included, other entrepreneurs, and really do some initial diving into, is this a good fit for their business, for us, and making sure there's kind of a mutual fit between both sides, which I'm sure I saw you had a recent post on LinkedIn. Setting client expectations is important. Yeah. Starting to have those conversations early on in the process is something that matters. And so that's really where I kind of get going. Prior to that, I've had a corporate life where I worked in retail. I also worked in CPG and demand planning and doing some other boring things. So we can go that way if we want to, but I really like where I'm at now in the sales side and working with all sorts of interesting businesses and founders.
I love it, man. Well, the first point I want to touch on is what is the number one thing that makes you feel tell the client nah, you're not a good fit for us?
Oh, that's a good one. I feel like there's all sorts of red flags that come up with clients.
Give me a few that you're just when you hear it, you're just
yeah, oh, let's see. Okay. I mean, I think one of them is as soon as they try to start piecing apart the offering. So for us, we have pretty much a full service option, and it's the person who's I like that you do XYZ things all together, but can we get just keyword research and you just edit some stuff, but we're going to do the writing, and they start to kind of pick apart the plan. I know right there, it's going to be a control issue. They're not going to want to give up. And you have to give up some control. Right. If you're going to be working with an agency, working with somebody else in your business, you can't try to hold on to all these different aspects. And it then forces us to change our process, which is going to make things less efficient. And ultimately, we're trying to streamline it for you and make sure that we can move the ball down the field and keep things rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the same thing with us over here. It's I mean, we just had a client call not too long ago where it's yeah, I need you to do this, but can we take this part out of it? And it's it's kind of an all or nothing deal at this point, because we know we've been down this pipe already where we start piecing things together, things get fragmented, results aren't good, we start getting blamed for things, and then it just becomes this downward spiral that you don't want to be part of, and you start to see those very early on when those conversations happen.
Measuring the results, like you just said there, that's one of the big problems when you start piecing things apart.
Especially with SEO, right? Okay, well, with SEO, right?
Yeah. If we're going to use, for people that might not know, I'm sure, most people who listen to you, SEO, search engine optimization, basically appearing in the search results on Google. There's a lot of elements that go into that. And what we're doing is creating content. So if you're going to be the one who handles the writing and we only do the keyword research and we turn that over to you, and then, 6 months down the road, things aren't going very well, and you're going to blame us. Is it our fault or is it your fault? Maybe you haven't executed very well.
Right.
And, it's one of those things where you got to go all in or all out. And we do have options that are more just strategy where we turn it over and say, look, it's up to you to execute on this, but you can't come back to us and say this didn't work. It's it's one of those, how many times have people taken a course, they sign up for something and then they never do anything with it.
Right.
So that's why when you do the full program, you're kind of all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask you, what is the like majority base of your clients? Are you guys working a lot of like, is it mostly like e-commerce brands right now? Are you working with startup companies like, apps and SaaS and stuff like that? Or is it kind of a mix of both? Like where do you guys usually, or I guess the question is who do you guys attract most of the
Yeah, it's a definite mix. I would say like our biggest success stories are almost all D2C
time?
brands.
Okay.
So the more consumer, the more broad based appeal you have, I think the better this model works for you. It can definitely work on the B2B SaaS side as well. So we have some very big B2B SaaS clients as well as some e-commerce clients. Those are sort of the two main buckets. But we recently had two apps that came through and have had quite a lot of success as well. Those kind of, I would say, cover off the main branch, but really one of our specialties I'd say would be like health, wellness, supplements, fitness. So if you're a company like you think Perfect Keto or Kettle and Fire, the type of businesses where these people are, if they're health conscious, if they're doing research, if they're asking questions, and you think about the keto wave that happened maybe 5 or 6 years ago,
Right.
that was like a spot, right, where there's lots of people like, what is the keto diet? Is the keto diet healthy? Is it safe?
Yeah.
Like all these types of questions you can create content for. So those are really great fits. Now on the B2B SaaS side, it can still work. But of course, if you're, especially say you're going after Fortune 1000 or Fortune 500 companies, it might be you're putting out a lot of content, and one lead from one piece might be worth $500,000 to you or $100,000.
Right.
So it's a little different game when you're like, hey, we're putting a lot of effort into this content. We're only going to get a couple leads, maybe per month or per year out of this, and it takes a long sales cycle. But it can still be very viable and is obviously important. You'll see big brands investing in their content for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you guys majority of the time, are you guys working with like some of these brands that, let's say, they've had a little bit of SEO strategy done by somebody else and you guys come in and just sort of pile on top of that? Or are you seeing most people just kind of, they hit the ground running, they went paid ads, got their customers, making revenue, and now they're like, wait a minute, that means if we stop spending money on Facebook ads, there's really nothing else tying us to another customer. Like we need some sort of like fallback, which I don't think SEO is a fallback, but some people think of it that way because they're like, oh, well, I need something to carry me through the times that I can't pay for the ads or whatever, or if it's not converting properly. So where are you guys catching these clients usually? What cycle are they usually in? And how does that usually turn out? Like, let's say 6 to 12 months down the road, like, are they seeing those results being like, oh, wow, this is amazing?
Yeah, I'd say like the better catch is the group that's come in and they've grown a lot, but they've maybe just started to touch the beginning of some content. Oftentimes, like who's a perfect client for us is they come in and they say, we've done really well with paid ads, we've done influencer marketing, we've got our email marketing set up, they've tested these other channels and set those up, they're standing, but they're like, we're spending $10,000 a month, $50,000 a month, $100,000 a month on paid ads, and we want to reduce our spend on that. We can't burn forever. And also too, it's an unreliable channel in the sense that if you stop paying those for those leads, they're going to go away. So how do you start to cement that? So that person, when they come into us, it's a really easy one to say. They're like, hey, we've thrown some content at the wall, but nothing's really stuck. We don't have like too much of a strategy. Yeah. That's the best pickup for us, is to say, okay, great. Like, let's go in. Also, there's learnings that come out of your paid, like what converts well for you, what is expensive to bid on. Maybe also too, there's been plenty of studies shown by these big SEO companies like Moz and Ahrefs. If you're the number one paid position and the number one organic position, you capture an insane amount of the clicks that come onto the first page, right? So there's lots of benefits for doing that. And I'd say the best ones are have your other marketing channels set up. And actually, one of the questions you asked about what makes for a red flag, who do I turn away? If somebody comes to me and SEO is the first thing they've tried and they don't have a good reason for why SEO is the first thing they've tried. Okay. So like say you're a restricted category, like you are in the cannabis space. Right. SEO might be your only option.
Right.
You can't do paid ads or it's really tricky. But if you're somebody else who, you sell a SaaS product and you haven't done paid ads, you haven't done these other channels, you don't have email marketing set up, you haven't done anything else, you've never tried a webinar, there's nothing. And you're like, oh, we need to get leads and we're going to Hail Mary it into content and hope it works with SEO. I always tell them, look, you need to try these other things first because they're faster, they're more iterative, you can test a little more quickly. content, you're going to be investing for a few months at least
Mm-hmm.
before you start to see any sort of results that you can really get your hands on.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys are always fighting that, instant gratification model where people are like, well, if I put out 3 pieces this week, do you think we'll get any leads? And you're just like, and buddy, that's not how it works.
Oh my God, dude, it's the worst when somebody's like, you haven't even published their first pieces of content yet, and they're like, when are we going to be at like 100,000 monthly visitors? They're like, a long time from now,
Yeah.
a long time from now, 12 months, like a year from now. You need to give this some time to bake a little bit.
Yeah.
It needs to marinate
Yeah.
before you can go ahead and just like expect this to come out right away. So that's one of those conversations. You try to head it off early on in the sales process, and I want to make it as easy as possible for our project managers and things to manage. When I say to the client, like, they ask, it's a very common question, right? How long is this going to take? And I can give them a timeline somewhat. I'll always go on the more conservative side. It's 6 to 12 months before you're really going to get the results you're hoping for,
right.
which is, thousands of new visitors, tens of thousands of new visitors coming through to your business. So it's going to be a little while. Expect to wait.
Yeah, exactly. And have you guys had any, whether it's recent clients or over the past, I don't know, couple of years where you guys did do some initial work and, maybe it was a clean slate where they just came to you at the beginning or like, hey, we need this, we know what we're doing. Usually those are the people that are already building their second brand and they're like, we need to start with the SEO piece. Have you guys seen any like quick wins where you're like, man, we just released this like first month and it's already, the visitors, like they kind of capture that category? Like, have you had that recently?
Yeah, pretty recently, within the last year, actually, maybe a couple months ago, there are cases where people come to us and they are starting SEO right from the beginning. And like you said, these are usually second, third time founders or people that have joined a company. They've been hired on as the marketing director and they know, I've done content for a past business. I know this is important. We want to start planting the seeds because we're not planning to harvest for 12 months, 2 years down the road. This is long term. So we had a company come in though, and we saw some pretty early success. They were an app. And they focused on planning bachelorette parties, essentially. So they catered to beyond just bachelorette parties, but really that was the core of what it was. So when they came, we were doing, I think they were getting a very small amount of traffic, maybe a few thousand, somewhere around 5,000 monthly visitors. And then within 3 months, they had already shot up to like 20,000.
Oh, wow.
So you can pick up like, it's a 4x, 400% increase almost in your traffic over just 3 months, which is pretty fantastic. So that can happen. And just because they had a really content rich area, there was tons of things you could talk about, like, games for bachelorette parties, how to split costs at bachelorette parties, best cities for bachelorette parties, guides to those cities. There was all sorts of things you could really talk about, and it was lower competition. So easy to kind of break in.
And are you guys usually the ones doing the idea generation for those content pieces, or do they provide you with like a list and be like, these are the things that we need to cover, and you guys do your magic to like adapt to these topics?
Yeah, it can go either way. It can be collaborative, and that's usually the best approach. Is, I'm sure it's the same for you. You want a client who's not so involved that they're like trying to micromanage you and tell you how to do your job, but you don't want them so aloof that when you send them something like, hey, what do you think of this? They're like, they don't respond to you for 3 weeks. So having that nice middle ground is really where it's the best. So when we onboard people, we get them to share, what topics do you want to be an authority for? What do you think is important to your brand? Who's your competition that you think is doing a good job? And we kind of get some of that information up front, but we do most of the topic generation just because what we're looking at is keyword search volume, difficulty, relevancy to your brand, intent. So we're coming up with that. We share it with the client and we ask them, like, take a look at this, because while we're looking at it from a search perspective, your business, is this relevant to you? Are these things you actually care about? Or would you prefer we try to go after some different topics that are maybe more difficult or have lower volume, but they're more relevant to your brand? So it's a little bit of both, but I'd say we generally lead on that effort.
I love it, man. And in terms of when you guys are working with some of these like companies that are, D2C brands and things like that, have you guys ran into a lot of cases where, they're getting the traffic, but the sales are just like not happening because their product is, whether it's not good or they're just, something's not working? Like, have you guys had that happen quite a bit?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the trickiest things with content. It's the same thing happens with all sorts of things, but you can build it and they will come as like a Field of Dreams reference, but not necessarily are they going to buy anything from you. Right. So if you land on your website and it's confusing, like even once they read the content, if it's hard for them to go check out the products that they wanted, or like there's all sorts of things. Like your sales funnel is, and also I'll tell people to do when you have some content on your site, somebody comes in and reads a blog, especially if you're selling a higher ticket item, if you're selling something, it's D2C, but maybe it's $100
Yeah.
or $200. And it's a more expensive product. Like even like a weighted blanket, you would think like, oh, people are going to buy this right away. But, it can be $200 or $300 for someone to purchase that. They're not going to necessarily buy the first time they land on your website. What the content is doing, though, is getting them into your system. But attribution for sales becomes a little bit tricky because once they visit your blog, now you can get them on, you got your pixel set up, you got your analytics set up, who's been to your site, you can follow them around with retargeting ads, you can get them to give them your email, you can remarket to them that way. So if they come and visit your blog and then a month later they click on an ad and then they give you their email and then they buy an offer on Father's Day or something, who gets the credit for that? Is it the blog that originally brought them in? Is it the email that converted them, or was it the ad they clicked on when they came and provided the email? So it's a little bit trickier, but sometimes the sales don't come right away or immediately on the surface. You have to kind of look at a little bit further, like, is this something that is building trust, building authority, helping the brand get recognized in the space? And that's ultimately helping us deliver more sales in other channels, whether that's through direct outreach sales or if it's people coming in through paid ads because they've seen your content, they've interacted with it, and then you've caught them a second time.
Yeah, that's super tricky. That's super tricky when you lay it out like that. It's like there's all these different pillars, and it's like if the content brought you in because you were searching for something, but you're not ready to buy, and then so that's extremely tricky. Now, I know you and I both have kind of stepped into the world of like LinkedIn and social posting and stuff. Have you guys entertained that as a possible like content strategy for a lot of your clients to start, I obviously know like on the website that's really important because it's driving the domain authority and all this other stuff. But I know LinkedIn, I know like Medium and some of these other like channels. They're pretty powerful because it's more concentrated. It's some of it's gated, some of it is not, whatever. Do you guys see that as like part of your new like strategy going forward? Because that's where a lot of the writing and a lot of the consumption is happening right
now. No, it's really true, right? Like, I think it's one of the things that other agencies and like companies have acknowledged and found as well is it's a lot harder to build a company brand on like a LinkedIn or Twitter than it is to build a personal brand. Often the way that even for us, like when Nat, the founder of Growth Machine, like is interacting with people on Twitter, it's through him that they would hear about the business, not through like the Growth Machine Twitter or the Growth Machine LinkedIn. So I do think it's a big part of it. And one of like, our most successful clients, one of the best things they can do is if they have a notable founder, somebody who has a following and they can share some of the content, you can get initial push behind it, which can really help speed things up. It is important, but it's not something that we're looking at managing just because the social side becomes an entire kind of other skill set. And beyond just reposting your content on there, I think there's like, we can dive into it. There's a lot more to, I think, building your personal brand or building a brand that people want to interact with and trust online, as opposed to just posting up the content, which is like what some people would consider building the brand, but it's kind of just, the easy, laziest step you can take.
Yeah. And that's one thing at Taco that we're, that we're starting to do a lot more, because we, at one point, I think we were releasing at least like one blog post per week, and, really like heavy, like long form stuff. And, like I said, I started, doing a lot more writing myself like the past 3 months. And it's one of those things where I'm starting to realize the different trends that are happening. And I went to, our COO, Emma, who does also our like content stuff. And I was like, you know what, we need to parlay and repurpose this content, like to like drive that, because my whole thing when we talk to clients is, clients will come and, we want to do this with Shopify. We want to do all these different things. And then they're like, and then we're just going to, hit it with paid ads. And I'm like, okay, before you go that route, the thing, kind of what you said in the beginning is like, cement some sort of content on your site that at least when you're driving that, people, if they don't buy, at least they can read about the product. They can read certain topics. They can see different resources that they can actually, and then take those and repurpose them, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter, create threads, create whatever it is, and let them live out there. Because at some point, if you're building that strategy, if you're building that personal brand, all that ties back into you and, whatever notable businesses that you might have. So that's been like one thing that we're trying to do on our end as well. Obviously we have, I don't know, years of content. So it's just going to be one of those things where we have to go back like the
Yeah.
last like 5 months and start there and just like break it all up into different pieces and like repurpose it and get it back to the blog. So it's something I'm really, really interested in with like a lot of your clients, because I know you guys do have some notable brands like Kettle and Fire and stuff. And, I know the founders of some of those are, pretty notable on the Twitter side of things and all this. And so I'm just always curious to see like how many of those people actually take that content and like leverage it on their personal brand to bring it back, kind of flywheel it into their brand.
It's a really interesting point you bring up, because the parsing it out,
and just to
or like
add, if I
breaking it
was
up,
if I
and
was on the other side, and you guys were managing my content, like I would almost hire somebody internally, like a VA, and like say like, okay, this blog is doing really well. Now go break it up into a different format. Like go break it up into bullet points versus like a whole like blog post or something like that. So that I feel like somebody you should definitely like impose that, because you can't lose that way. You just paid, you guys charge people for this stuff, and they can do whatever they want after that you guys do it for them. So why not just parlay it into these other pieces?
100%. I tell them on the call, I say like, look, they're like, what, especially when they're asking like, how long does this take? What can we expect? I'm like, look, you'll get more out of it if you're utilizing this content exactly like you've said. Chop it up and send it out. Like do a monthly email that says like, hey, in case you missed it, this was our top performing, most popular blog post this month.
Exactly.
Or like, whatever the certain seasons coming up, right? Like say you're a fashion brand or whatever, right? There's obvious things like, it's the summer season's coming up, or like Christmas season's coming up, and you're a retail like software, or tax season's coming up and you're an accounting thing. Like, don't forget to check out this blog article about like the 5 things you need to know for tax season as a business owner. Like all those types of opportunities, and you can drive them back over, or you tweet it out, you break up little bullet points. That's super valuable. And it's just repurposing that content. And that's what I tell them too. I'm like, this content it's great to put it on your website, but it shouldn't just live on your website.
Right.
It should be sales enablement material. It can be stuff you send out to people. Your client comes to you, potential client has a question, and you say, oh, here, like we have an article that goes more in depth on this. And you can deliver extra value to
exactly. And that's literally that. I'm so glad you brought up that last point about like sending them back to that blog, because that's literally all we do when we have a sales or anything like that. We're just like, you want to read about recharge, instead of me sitting here typing email, like here's a link to our our blog, and you can get all the nitty gritty details and all this other stuff. So no, that's really awesome. And I do think that there's going to be a play, and I know a lot of people are already doing it, about really leveraging the social media side of things as being sort of the pillar for those things. The only problem with that is that you run into kind of what you said in the beginning, is like you don't want to build around a platform, because not that LinkedIn or Twitter is going away anytime soon, but at the same time you don't necessarily own that. You don't know what's attributed to that. So at least when you're on the web on your website and you have it on your blog, at least then you have a touch point. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. So it's extremely interesting, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of changes on how not only content is written, but it's how it's also delivered and how it's distributed. Like I think a lot of that stuff is funneling back into social blogging rather than just like website blogging.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Twitter and all the threads, right? Like now the mega threads that come out, where you could almost have a blog article and turn it into a thread. You can definitely use it as the core of one of your like, here's a thread on, and you have 10 points that you're going to go through. And 140 characters each, you can get basically a mini blog article or half a blog article put out through there. And threads tend to do really well, especially if you're delivering what people see as valuable information. Maybe they would never read your blog article if you said, go read my blog, but for some reason they'll check out your whole thread.
Exactly. With the little finger pointing down.
yeah. Thread below, right? Yeah.
I love it. And how are you now? I know you and I talked briefly and kind of switch gears. Like, what is your goal, kind of building a little bit of that personal brand and like putting yourself, like, I mean, obviously you have a lot of experience. You probably have a lot of knowledge to share with people through your process of sales and with everything going on in a growth machine, and you being sort of the funnel that like drives all the projects and everything. I'm sure you see a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Like, how are you parlaying that into like personal experience, personal brand, personal growth?
Yeah, and pretty much exactly that on the sales and marketing side and things around SEO. That's just where I started, right? So I think that's sales and marketing, obviously a big topic for people on LinkedIn. If you care about that, you can go find all sorts of people talking about it. So I've just started posting what I know. I remember like one of the first posts I made on LinkedIn that was more successful was just about my frustration with clients that would come in. And I think my example was like somebody who wants to rank number one for the word insurance. It's like, no, you don't want to rank number one for that word, because like, unless you're State Farm or Allstate or one of these companies, like unless you hired an NBA player to like do a commercial for you recently, you don't have the budget to compete for that. And also it's super like low intent. What somebody who's searching that could have all sorts of questions. They could be looking for house insurance,
Right.
car insurance, life insurance. Like, what are you doing? So, you want to search for something that's much higher intent, like car insurance for a 16-year-old.
Right.
Like that's a way higher intent, because it's probably a parent looking or the kid themselves doing research, figuring these things out. So I started writing about things like that, kind of just like you said, playing into what it is I know. And it's interesting because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The mixture between the professional sharing of information around what it is, I'm an expert in, versus also just my own thoughts and opinions. Because like I was saying, I think where the personal brand succeeds and the company brand fails is companies don't have personalities really.
Right.
So with a person, like I can share this information, but for people to feel like they can trust you, I feel like they also want to see some reflection of what you just think about other topics, whatever that is. So like whether it's,
A little more
what's happening in the stock
open-minded, a little
market
bit.
or the layoffs that are all happening. Like you see people talking about that a lot.
Yeah, like a little more open-minded. They want to see that there's a human behind this whole thing. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. No, I think for what I've started to notice, and getting back into like sales calls and different things like that, now if you don't catch it, like it's one of those things where people say, oh yeah, I read about your company, and then I took a read about your team, or I searched your name in the thing, and I saw that you're doing all these other things, or whatever it is, and it's like, oh, now people are sort of connecting that dot back from like the personal to like the brand, and seeing where that, because I think, and I could be completely wrong, I think drop shipping really ruined that for a lot of people, because you were just kind of like, set up this store, there's no personality behind it, and
Right.
it's just like this like revolving door of products coming in and out. And I feel like now people are like, man, I've had so many bad experiences, let me see if there's an actual real human behind this. And you and I were talking about Upwork not too long ago, and I think
Right.
for me, like as a lead generation thing, when I was starting as a freelancer, that was always one core component that I really wanted to make sure that came across, whether it was in my first like response to the person. It's like, no, I'm a real human, and like if you want to jump on a video chat right now, or if you want me to take a picture of myself, I will. Like I'm not hiding behind some camera somewhere in who knows where, saying that I'm in a
Yeah.
different place, because there's also a lot of that. Like there's a lot of people that are just kind of trying to do the workaround and all this other stuff. And there is something to say when you solidify it. Like, for example, like Nat. Nat has built a personal brand. He's built a business. He's built a couple different businesses. And everything that he did, it's always like, well, I could talk about, for a minute, he was talking about like tea and different things like that. Now I can go talk about like
Yeah.
SEO stuff. And now I could talk about DeFi. And now I could do, all these different components. And I think that's okay. And I think like, yeah, you need to have maybe more of like a niche focus in certain areas, but it's okay to have your thoughts and opinions. And I heard something great today. It's like, well, I made $1 million last year, and I consider myself an expert, let's say. But the other person that made $5 million now, like, am I not an expert anymore just because he made 5 million?
Right.
You know what I mean? So you have to also take that into consideration, where it's like, no, you could be an expert on a much smaller level, but you could still know your shit really, really well.
Yeah, of course. Like there's levels to the game, but also there's people that aren't, they're not chasing the biggest bag. The guy who only maybe did $1 million, maybe they value, only working 16 hours a week because they have young kids and they want to spend as much time with their family
Exactly.
as well, versus somebody who's, 26, they're really hungry, they're just plowing all the money they make back into the business, and like they're really trying to grow. I mean, both those people can be experts, but
Exactly.
one of them just has different priorities.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Now,
Yeah.
where do you think, like, what is your next kind of goal with your brand? Is it more like, you want to get into like the advising and consulting pieces of it, or where do you kind of see yourself taking your journey? Because I know, obviously, like I said in the beginning, you're posting a lot of content, you're talking about your experiences. Like, what are some ideas? And
Mhm.
sometimes your ideas may just be like, oh, I need to pivot because I just saw another opportunity. But like, where do you kind of see that going?
Yeah, I think two things that actually one of them was inspired by you in our previous conversation is like the info product space, and you can call it courses or whatever it
Right.
is, but nowadays it's easier to share what it is, what you're an expert in. And I think figuring out what it is that you're good at and this is what one of the advantages of the content piece as well. If you're posting and building this brand, inevitably occasionally something kind of hits a little bit and people will interact with it and you can see, oh, there's interest behind this. Is this something I could build an ecosystem around? Could I build a course?
Mm-hmm.
Should I do a cohort? Could I do something with this? So I think like that would be something that interests me, would be finding what I would have an interest in, maybe trying to teach others. I love teaching and talking to people. So I think getting that sort of an opportunity would be potentially maybe the next step. I also do like the idea of the consulting or advising sort of a thing, especially for brands that maybe I have some passion about, in the sense that like if they're doing something for a cause that I believe in, I
Yeah.
guess is where I'm going here. I think giving away a little bit of your time and your skills and abilities, it's good for the universe. It's going to come
Right.
back if you like, the person who also works at that company or advises them on the board, you get to talk to them, and then that opens up more doors for you. So I think that side is where it would be, or the info product. Those are the two areas. And it's actually funny because one of the things you mentioned, um, with like being a real person, I don't know if you do this, but maybe it's just the sales side. Every time I basically get any meeting, any lead, anything, pretty much the first thing I do is I take their name and I just go put it into Google and type LinkedIn behind it,
Yeah.
and I look for them on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the reason I chose LinkedIn as the platform first, especially being in sales, because I'm sure they're doing the same thing to me. Everyone I talk to, they're going on
Mm-hmm.
and checking to see, are you a real person? Have you ever said anything before, or are you kind of just
Yeah.
an anonymous automaton
Right,
in the
right,
background?
exactly. And then you see that they viewed your profile, and I was like, I knew it.
Yeah,
That's still the
yeah,
creepiest thing
yeah.
about LinkedIn, by the way. I hate that they have that feature, but it is what it.
You got to pay for
Uh,
it. You got to pay to know, but they definitely know that people love to see who's been looking and
yeah,
how many have
yeah.
been looking.
What
And
a
yeah,
mousetrap,
yeah,
man! What a fucking mousetrap.
yeah. I had a question for you
Yeah,
actually that I wanted to ask, because something I've been playing around with a little bit lately
yeah,
is how I plan my day and like set my schedule, and especially with doing sales, right? How do I allow myself to get booked up for meetings?
right.
So on your side with the agency in the past and what you're doing now, how do you plan your day? Do you set aside certain time? I know some people are free flowing and some like to lay it out by the minute. So where do you fall?
Okay, so two answers to that question. One is yes, I have a plan, but it's also a plan, like a work in progress plan as well. Like, so there's constant like optimization. One thing that especially being now back into the sales side of things at Taco, one of the big things that I did probably, I want to say a couple years now, maybe even a little bit longer. I used to be a lot more free flowing with my calls. One thing I realized is fragmentation starts to happen really quickly because now I am sitting here doing some work, helping my team with stuff, and all of a sudden somebody booked a call in this period of time, and I have an hour gap now, a call, and then I have to go back. So to me, that was always like, man, I don't really feel like I get anything done at this point because I'm constantly going back and forth. So 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that, I think I read something, whether it was on Twitter or I don't know what I saw, and somebody was like, just block off your calendar for two. Oh, you know what it was? I think I ended up reading, Jason Fried from Hey.com and Basecamp. Have you ever heard of him? Uh,
Oh yeah. I know him from Basecamp.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So he had something that he said that clicked with me, and obviously, they have like this whole thing about not having phone calls, everything's asynchronous, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'd love for that to be the case, but it's just not possible with like agency client work. Like it's
Yeah.
possible, but it's really not that possible. It's
It
hard.
gets messier.
Yeah,
Sometimes it creates more
yeah,
problems.
it just
Yeah.
everything takes 10 times longer, and yeah, it's a little bit, you lose a little bit of your sanity, but I mean, it is what it is at this point. We're still young. So I noticed, but something I took from him was like, don't, basically, like, don't let your clients like just throw themselves on your calendar because that's your time. You delegate when that time is given and when that time is taken. So like you have to be on both sides of it. And so I just went to doing Tuesdays and Thursdays are sales calls days. Those days are completely
Mm.
open, with obviously like an hour or half an hour buffer time between each call. And in the beginning, you get a client, let's say on a Friday, sends you a lead, or maybe let's say a Thursday, and it's already been your call day, and they come in the middle of the day. Obviously, we don't let people book on the day because that's just crazy. And so they'll be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wait, I have to wait till Tuesday," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's just how we do calls." And I'm telling you, man, it's been one of the best, like one of the biggest blessings because of the fact that you don't know how many people thought that they would hate that, and then they're just like, okay, like I'll wait. And it's just one of those things where you're just like, that's all I had to do. Because before, people would be like, oh, you don't have anything tomorrow? And I'm like, nope, like my calendar is right there, whatever you see on there. And they're like, well, every other day is blocked off except Tuesday and Thursday. I was like, so you put something on Tuesday and Thursday, man. Like it's not that really that crazy.
That's
So
the thing.
but yeah, blocking off those separate days, because then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's just all work. It's just anything that needs to be done gets done, and then also I think it allows the team to kind of adjust to that schedule a little bit, because we didn't start involving our project managers on sales calls till pretty recently. So it was also one of those things we want people to also
Mm.
have a little bit more balance, because a lot of our folks are doing other things on the side. Maybe they have side businesses and different things. So it allows us to give some structure to the chaos a little bit. And I think that goes both
Mm-hmm.
ways. It goes for me and goes for them. So that way, expectations on Tuesdays and Thursdays are, Z getting back to me on something is going to be if I have like 10, 15 minutes or an hour in between a call. If I'm not eating or something, like I'll get back to you. But if I don't, just know that it's going to get done the next day when I don't have a call. But to that point, so that's on the sales side. But to the point, then it's like, all these other things going on. And I think for me, what I've been working on, this is the work in progress part, is like, for me, what I've been working on is, so having a service agency, having a product agency, building a personal brand, having the podcast, like all these things start to like kind of like layer on top of one another. Is figuring out time blocks, and that's one thing I'm working on. Is like, okay, in the morning, from the time I have my coffee at like 6:30 in the morning till, let's say, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, like I want to make that like a time block where I focus simply on some of my personal stuff. Like, let me just get that out of the way. Let me get some of that stuff dialed in, and kind of go from there. And then after that, it could be like, okay, go into the service side of things. All right, what does everybody need from me? What's going on? What's on my to-do list? Okay, I can knock most of this out. And then maybe the second part of the day is like a little bit more balanced. Like maybe that's like me, going to do exercise or whatever it is, and then coming back and doing some product stuff and really figuring it out, because that doesn't have necessarily like client deadlines. That's just internal stuff that we set for ourselves. So I think I'm still working through how I phase out my day. But I do have to say, being in the service side of things, that sometimes makes it a little bit hard, because you're constantly having to put out, whether it's a small or a big fire, there's always a fire to put out one way or another.
Yeah, and I think with the service side too, any service agency, as well, like there has to be some flexibility. Like I set my calendar as well. I like to take all my meetings before 2:30 in the afternoon,
Yeah.
because just as far as follow-up goes, when it comes to sending over proposals or getting keyword research started or doing something else for them, I want to give myself time at the end of the day. I don't like to take calls right at the end of the day, because it always means working late,
Hmm.
and pushing things over. So I like to give myself a buffer at the end of the day. And in the case where somebody really needs to meet with me, like one case I'm sure it's happened to you before at least, is we'll get a client from like Australia or Singapore,
Yeah.
or somebody reaches out and they're like, I have to make some sort of an exception.
Right.
But that's okay. I'm okay to make the exception, but the exception can't become like the creeping rule where I'm making these exceptions all the time and just open up that calendar. And actually, I'm curious, especially on the personal side, because you were talking about how that all slots in the
Yeah.
podcast
Yeah.
and everything else, the personal brand. Um, I heard Alex, I think is Hormozy. I'm not sure how you say
Hormozy.
his
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
name. The
Yeah.
guy from Gym Launch. Yeah, I saw he did said something I thought just it resonated super well with me, because I'm the type of person I can procrastinate. If I don't give myself some sort of a debt, like I need a date on the calendar that this has to be done by, or otherwise I can kick it down the road.
Right.
So one of the things he was talking about is like, how do you get more productive? Like the Elon Musks of the world, they're super productive, but they don't have any more time in the day than you do. So how do they get so much done? And it's by putting time constraints onto things. So if you're going to be reviewing ad copy, you're going to do that for 30 minutes. Okay, well, you have 30 minutes, so you can't be as perfectionist or nitpicky. Like you know
Mm-hmm.
you can get as much done as you can in that time period. You're working out for 1 hour. Okay, like I'm going to hit this workout really hard, and I know it's coming between 12 and 1. So like by putting constraints onto doing things, whether it's coming up with new blog ideas or working on your own podcast, if you have that in the calendar like we do today, you know that there's an hour or an hour and a half or whatever it is of time that you're putting towards something, and it kind of gives you the right to work on that exclusively. And like you said, that's where like protecting it from those interrupting calls. There's no time less productive than 30 minutes in between two sales calls. Like
Exactly.
you can never get anything
Yeah,
done.
I get a drink of water and get a snack and back to it. Like that's literally what it comes
Yeah.
down to. No, I really like that. And I think the time constraint, like that's kind of where I was going with the time block stuff is like really on the
Yeah.
calendar setting that up. But yeah, I find it and this is again procrastination. I read something again by Jason Fried the other day was like procrastination can sometimes be the biggest blessings because you'll actually get shit done when it's like there's a deadline. So if you procrastinate, if you know that something's due in a week and you wait till the day before, like you have no choice than to get it done because it's due tomorrow. Like you have so I was actually, he turned that around and he flipped it really nicely. And I was like, I can get behind that because I used to procrastinate a lot more. So that was a big thing. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. And I think for me, with a lot of these like different tools and especially like our internal operations, like one thing that it's been like a really big goal like at Taco and everything else that we're doing is really making sure that like the core operations were as automated and as efficient as like possible. And you and I talked about even just like the proposal process, right? Like going
Yeah.
through that process, knowing, because that's another thing we like standardize, like between one client and the other, we don't necessarily have different like rates or whatever it is. It's like this is our thing. Yeah, sometimes we'll change things around if it's like a long-term client. There's like very little to it, but everything still stays within the same format. And so I think at the core of the business, and this is why I'm such a proponent of systems and infrastructure, because coming from a PM background, if you don't have that, everything comes down crumbling. And I made that mistake starting my agency very early on because I was wearing so many hats that I couldn't really document things properly for the next person to come in and just jump into things. It was always like, it's like trying to, hey, I'm working, let me document, but while I'm working, like it's like this, you got your hands in too many things and you're not helping them, you're not helping
Yeah.
yourself. And so for me, that's always been, when we brought on Emma, who was actually a content editor, and she was like, hey, I think I can help you with all this operation stuff. And I was just like, oh, okay, like here you go, basically, like do the thing. And she was like, I really enjoy it. And I'm like, can you just systemize everything and do the whole process? And that was like, lifeline for her. So yeah, I think there needs to be some sort of, like, for example, even my personal brand, like a lot of the stuff that I post, very rarely do I go and write stuff on the day to like post it. I
Mhm.
try to work on 3 to 4 days out. Like I always try to push things. I'm trying to get to a place where I can have like a week ahead of like a week ahead already planned out, my content scheduled, it'll release. I can engage with, whoever's engaging and kind of like start being more in like a timely manner. But I think that there's a lot of work to do around there, especially when you have so many different facets of like business, and I'm involved in so many different things, doing consulting, doing this. It's like you want to be flexible, like you said in the beginning, when it's like somebody from a different country, but you also at the same time want to be like, hold on, I built the system for myself to not have to stretch myself too far. Like I'm still trying to work within those guidelines, so it's a work in progress, man.
Do you find that you're someone who like is good at codifying like process development, building out the system, and then documenting it? Because I feel like the thing I like to do is come up with the process, but the actual documentation side of it, like I always jokes my partner, she's a project manager, and she like loves to like recap things in emails and take notes and like put things in drives and like organize. and I am not a big fan of doing all of that. So I need like that. I need like the Robin to my Batman to like come, like, here's the process now. Like, you document this for me, and like, please put it all together, and like, so everyone
That's
knows what's going
dude,
on.
that's absolutely me, dude. That's so I didn't so a funny thing is I think that ends up coming with like some of the delegation too. Is like in the beginning I wasn't really like that because everything depended on me. But then I came to find out that I'm like, oh, I'm not so great at this. So like let me just hand it off to somebody else. But that you're absolutely right. I'm like the person I have the best brain dumps, dude. Like I can throw shit onto a paper like nobody else can. But then and I love formatting. This is the really fucked up part. Like I love formatting. I love cleaning stuff up. I love making it look pretty. But when it comes to like turn that one piece into like a 5-piece thing and like really structuring out like all the nitty-gritty details, I'm like, get this away from me now. Like get this off my desk because it's never gonna get done.
And you never find a more valuable like team member or employee or whoever like a component to you
Yeah.
that can do that, because there's some people that are amazing, and whenever I see them, like, they're a wizard. Like, they can just take
Okay,
they can
Emma
take
used
this
to be
brain dump
called
of all these ideas.
Yeah, Emma used to be called the ops wizard at our company. I'm so glad you just said that. Like her name before she became COO literally used to say ops wizard in there. That's so funny that
That's
you
so funny. That's too good, because yeah, I mean, like, and it's the same way that they may have ideas occasionally, and come up with some things, but they're very good integrators. So it's like, especially, you founded the agency, you worked as a freelancer. There's like a visionary component,
Yeah.
like the person who's idealizing, coming up with the parts of the business, and then there's integrators, right? People that are actually making sure
Mm-hmm.
that your visions become reality, and that's where the delegating piece comes into it. I'm actually curious, when you hire somebody, and you're bringing them on, what is your kind of like litmus test? How do you do that when it comes to the hiring for Taco, or for, if anything in your life, really, when it comes to like bringing somebody in to work on a project with you? What do you look for in someone, and like, how do you suss that out?
I don't look at resumes, that's for sure, dude. I do not look at a resume. To be quite honest, I there is sort of this like pre-filter that I have. One would be so if I reach out to somebody, let's for example just even use Upwork for the sake of this conversation. So I'm hiring somebody on Upwork, whether it's a project manager or whoever it is. Um, one thing is always seeing the response. I think when you see a response from somebody that's actually, and listen, if somebody fools me with this and they wrote this really nice template, props to them. I will bite to that every time. But I can usually tell after so many years, like who is authentic and who's not. Like you can kind of see if it's like, it's like the person that just gives you everything that they can do, and you're just like, I don't really care about that. Tell me about, something cool that you did. Give me like, do you have a dog? Like, what do you do on your day? Like, give me something that I know. It's again going back to that human aspect. It's like, give me something that will tie me, be like, I can get along with that person. And so I think it comes down to that. And then the other piece of it is, obviously attention to detail to like the sort of the application process, and being like, people used to do this all the time. It's like, put this word in the subject line if you really read this whole thing. That still works, unfortunately, because people don't pay
I feel
attention.
like you lose 50% of people on that one. It's mind blowing how many people don't do it.
Exactly. And then I think to me it's also like, I love when people will just email me on the side, or will like find me, like whether it's on Twitter or whatever else it is, and be like, "Hey man, just want to say like thank you for that," or I'm really pumped to hear about the job or whatever it else. Like, give me that extra little proactivity. Like a taste of proactivity goes a very long way with me, because everyone that we've hired at Taco, I've made some bad hires, I've made some great hires. I've also been part of not hiring the process of some of our recent PMs. But I realized that a lot of the components that we all talked about as a team when we did start doing this is, how do we identify the proactivity and the ownership piece? Because as a project manager specifically, if we're hiring you to come in and really own this project and you're becoming part of the face of the company at this point. You're becoming a
Right.
pillar to our business, because now that client that's paying us this money, they don't associate Z with that project. That was maybe in the beginning, but you've overwritten that, and you are now part of this component that the client says, no, so and so told me this. It the accountability kind of shifts at that point. At the end of the day, I still take accountability for everything that my team does, but at the same time, like that person knows like I own this project. So like, what do we need to do to get this done? Because everything I've done for the past 3 months, if I don't finish it now, then it's all basically not gone to waste, but you kind of don't feel proud of it anymore. And so to me,
Yeah.
that's always been one big thing. And we like label that on everything is be proactive. Like whatever that little thing is, be proactive. And that's the same thing with me. When clients reach out to me or I reach out to them, I always want to throw in something in there and be like, this is the next thing. And they're just like, oh, well, you went one step above that I even imagined you would. That's great. Like, let's get on a call. And that usually works really, really well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think proactivity, like I just call it like get stuff done. Like the
Yeah.
people that will not wait for like, oh, I ran into an issue. Like, well, what have you done? Well, I just wanted to talk to you about it. Like, no, like you should have like 5 things you've already thought of, or like what would you have responded to them like, and I can just approve like and say yes, go ahead and send that. Like that sort of an attitude, I think is like you said, resumes. I'm pretty sure like I don't maybe for corporate jobs and
Yeah.
stuff or entry level, but like they're going to be dead. They're pretty much like
Yeah.
dead in my mind already. I don't think anyone cares about, or at least in my experience,
Yeah.
it's very unlikely they care that much about your resume. The further you get out of your first job, perhaps. And yeah, like when it comes to doing that proactive digging or initial pushing, like I am a big fan of. I use an app, free plug for them, called Vidyard,
Okay.
and I love to send little video clips in sales responses, and I've gotten so many compliments from clients saying like loved the little video explainer.
That's so
Just because
awesome.
like if I send over a proposal and I walk through the proposal with them, it stops us having to get on another call because they had a question. Because like sometimes you go through a proposal and you might have one little question, but like I've already addressed it for you, or I've
Dude.
already shown you the pricing and I've talked over top of it. So I think that's like it's another step that just can separate you from the person who only wants to do the email. And I think that persistence, the second piece, like you said, the follow up with me outside of the way I got the job at Growth Machine. I told you this before, but I think a good story. Like
Yeah.
I had to apply for this job 3 times to get it. And I the first time I applied, didn't get it. And then I see it posted again, and I hit Nat up and said, hey, see it's posted again, reapply, go a little further in the process, didn't get it. Third time, come back and say, hey, the first 2 guys must not have worked out, but I still think I can do it. So why don't you say, what do you say? Like, do you want to do this again? Yeah. And then, ultimately I'm still here.
I
So
love it.
it's one of those things where like especially for a sales position, I think persistence is a key thing. I don't know how many times I've email. It's like the 8th email to somebody. They finally respond to me. And like, I got off a call with a guy I talked to like 18 months ago, and like prospects looking good. So I think it's one of those things like having that initial and extra effort that you can get somebody to apply. It, not everyone has it. And it's super valuable when you find the people that do that.
I so agree with that, and I think that also sets apart. Like, I love the whole video thing because, I'm always thinking about that, and I love like tools like Loom and how easy they make it to like respond video to video and do all these great things. So to me, that's always been like a really, really important factor. And I love that you guys do that. But I think it would be one of those things where you could just throw together like some video and like you have this kind of like vague like default thing. But I can tell you that when I even take a step back, like when I'm working with developers, right, we're working on something for a client. Now I'm not involved in the details of like how this gets built. Like I give an overarching view, like this is how it needs to work, here's the process, we do a flow chart, whatever it is, and then the thing gets built. I can't tell you. I just had a call with our lead developer, Michael Hatako. Man, this guy, I cannot tell you what sort of standard he set for like documentation. I mean, dude, Nathan, like this guy is just different level. Like I got off a call, like, or I got on a call with him, and before I even like said anything, I was like, I just want to tell you, man, like you just blew me out of the water. Like with what you're doing, I mean, to the point of like every little detail that the client doesn't even fucking need to know about it. He's just like, nope, this is how it works. And I'm like, man, bless your heart, because you don't know how far this goes for somebody that's not technical. When I can just sit there and literally read this and in my logical sense, with my common sense, put two and two together and be like, ah, That's how it works. Like, this is how we're transferring information or whatever it is. So to me, that goes a really long way. And then on top of that, somebody creates like a video and it's like, let me just guide you through it as well while you're reading it. I'm like, oh
Mm.
my God, bless your soul. So I
That's
props to
actually such
you.
a perfect thing, like to as an example too, because like I'm not a coder. I have no technical
Yeah,
software development. Like I can't read Python or
yeah,
write it or whatever. But I've seen enough internet memes to know that like what sets the men from the boys
yep,
apart or whatever, like the great coders from the good coders is that
yep,
documentation, right? It's when your lead developer leaves and the next person comes in and something breaks, do they know how to fix it, or do they go in and go, I don't know how any of this works, because like
yep.
it's a mystery that it works at all. And like, yeah,
And and
it's
then
one of those.
and then you know what ends up happening? Then that new developer's like, well, I need to refactor this because I have no idea. And then you're just like, oh, we're now going 10 steps backwards when this problem could have been solved just by simple documentation and knowing, like, you know what I mean? So it just becomes so no, props to you on doing that, because I'm guaranteeing this is probably why when I was talking to Nat, like, a year and a half ago, he was just like, we need to send this kid on vacation because he's closing too many deals. It's probably because you're sending videos, dude.
And they're bespoke videos too. Like you said, I could create a generic video
Yeah.
that everyone gets to see, but it's not. It's like I show you your site on Ahrefs and I take a look at your traffic and your top pages and I say like, look, you're this is what I'm seeing. There's a huge opportunity here. This is what you're missing. Why don't we hop onto a call and discuss? And like that goes way further than the generic canned video that, I mean, those have their place
Yeah.
for certain things, but I think it's like we're saying, if you can actually go the little bit of extra distance, that gives them the confidence, like, oh man, this guy's doing this, and like, I don't even work with him, and I've given him no money.
Right.
What's he going to do when we pay them to do something for us?
Exactly. That you hit the nail on the head with that one. That's literally what it is. When you show them that little piece, it's like it's that whole saying. You give them you give them an inch and they take a mile. They're just like, oh, what's going to happen on the other side? Like, no, I love that, man. I love that. No, these are all really really good points, and there's so much more to like figure out and like optimize around that process and like all that. But I was going to say, what sort of changes are you guys seeing in the content world at the moment that you're just, I know obviously there's been a lot of stuff with like on the ad side with like Facebook and iPhone and all these other things. Like, what are you guys seeing on the content side that's like, okay, there's some changes coming down the pipe on here? Is there anything?
Yeah, I think the inevitable like change that's going to happen is the importance of video. It's already here. It's just
Yeah.
how much more important does it become, and how much. One of the things is, and you've probably seen this, right? Even yourself or people out there, when you do a Google search, occasionally you might get recommended like a certain segment of a YouTube video. So it'll be like,
Yeah.
at a minute 40 to 2 minutes 10 seconds, like this is the answer to your question. So as Google gets better at indexing video and identifying content that answers questions within it, that's going to be a massive like shakeup. The other thing is voice search, right? So voice search is one of the LinkedIn posts I was talking about. Voice search has grown, and it's one of the things you don't really think about. But smart home is probably everyone who has like a Google Home or an Alexa or
Right.
something, right? And everyone's smartphone can do it. And the way that you search is a lot different on a text search where you type it in versus a voice search. When you are typing something in, you might be like, I don't know, best marathon shoe. It might be
Right.
something you type in. But if you're on your phone, you might say, you know, what's the best marathon shoe for a beginner? Like the search is way longer.
Mm-hmm.
And the search volume for that is very small, but the person who's searching that, they're giving a lot more information about their intent. So like that's going to be one thing that changes it. The video aspect is going to be changing it. And I think those two things, as we just continue to progress along in time, it's really going to be interesting to see how those affect businesses, especially voice as well. If you're a local business, we don't really cater to local businesses, but one of the most common searches that's going to happen is like you bring out your phone and you say like ATM near me, or like
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's near me, or whatever it is, sunglasses near me. Like all
Yeah.
sorts of searches happen that way all the time. And if you miss out on the opportunity for like Chinese food near me because you haven't set up any sort of your SEO from a search perspective, you don't have a Google My Business profile, you haven't done these things, you're missing massive businesses that your competitors can easily come in and take away from you. So I think that those are two big ones for sure. I'm curious to hear what you see coming in the Shopify side of the world and like the e-commerce, because that's equally changing all the time.
Well, I'll tell you something. It's so funny that you brought up the whole voice thing because first I want to say the fact that you brought up the whole Alexa thing. I don't know how much you listen to any like Gary Vaynerchuk's like content, but he has a piece that he released probably about a year ago when I first heard it. He was at some like conference speaking, and he goes, and this takes me right to what you just said is brand. If you say I need a lawyer, and wherever you're located, if that person does not have a brand and they're not showing up anywhere, it's only the first and only one that the person's going to click on is the one that's hey, I need a lawyer in Boston, I need a lawyer here, whatever it is. And if you're not the lawyer in Boston, everyone else doesn't fucking matter. And that I think is a really, really big piece. Now, on the e-commerce side, I've been sitting on this idea, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 months at this point. It's very related to voice. So I have this idea of a post-purchase thing. So I kind of came up with this when like Clubhouse was happening. What happens is, let's say I'm selling, iPhone cases, and I buy iPhone case A, and that iPhone case is something, I don't know, a little bit different. I'm just using this as an example. A lot of people, from what I understand and I see, is that a lot of people won't read all the descriptions about the product. They won't see any of this other stuff. I think the next move is when you purchase a certain product, when you get to that confirmation page on Shopify, there's going to be a post-purchase voice memo from the founder, a very raw one that says, hey, Z, or, do some AI shit to figure out the name, pull the name from the thing. It doesn't even have to. It could be a vague message. It doesn't matter. Hey, Nathan, just want to let you know, thanks for buying that case. Here's how I use it, and here's how I use it on my phone, and here's a really cool feature. If you open up the case, inside you can store your credit card. You're like, oh shit, I had no idea. That's really cool. Thank you. And that comes directly from the founder. It's a very raw voice note. It's very personal. It's very not only sales driven, but it's feature rich to the point. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes of him talking about the fucking iPhone case. It's just a simple little snippet of information that you're going to get from him that you're going to be like, oh, how would I got that information any other way? I would have had to read the description. I would have had to read the guide nobody wants to do that. Give me something quick and easy that's going to give me that insight on that product. And I think that's the next move.
That's like almost an evolution on the like the SMS text follow up for like abandoned carts and things, right? That people use now, where it's like that's like I always see ads for it that are. We're going to be talking to a company. I think tomorrow I have a call with someone that is in this space where it's that it's like something like 230% more likely to get a response to an SMS follow up than to email or any other type of follow up that you're sending to a customer. So if you can get that, and like, even if it's just a thank you, like, hey, thanks for buying this iPhone case, like, 10% of this is going to save dolphins or whatever it is, right? Like something that just like, oh, cool. Like I learned something about my phone case that like you said, I would not have read in the description, or the little pamphlet that comes in the box. Like you throw that out and you never think of it again.
Exactly. And also having a reference point to those voice notes, right? Like, so dropping it into your Shopify account. So if you come back or you log in, you get them via email, maybe you drop your phone number in there, maybe you get them via text and say, hey, go to this link anytime if you want to hear the voice notes from our founder regarding this product. And those voice notes over time can also be updated. Like if you have some new features part of that product or whatever it is, like you can, especially digital products and different things like that. So I think that's going to be sort of the next move. And I see that as being like a really, because people, the thing with the video is as great video is it's not easily, it's not easy to create it. It's easy to create it. It's the wrong word, but it's takes much more time because people care how they look. And that, I think, goes a long way than somebody just sitting here in their pajamas saying, hey, I'm going to record a voice note for one of my new products. Like they can do that anywhere, anytime. They don't care what they look like or anything like that. So I think that goes a different route. It drops that wall of insecurity for people, and they can just talk on their phone.
I think another thing, even with just video, like is it sounds funny, but when you're talking about like text follow up and things like that, or like being able
Hmm.
to, it's larger bandwidth, right? It's like it's a larger file. It's like
Exactly.
audio is still, it's one of those things you can record audio on your phone and send it. Like when you do the video thing, if you record it for too long and you try to send it, it's like this file is too large, or you
Yeah.
come out looking really pixely or whatever it is.
Yep.
Yeah, I think voice is a really interesting direction for where things are going to go, and it's especially now too. Like you see with people with the little Pixel Buds or the iPhone, a little earpiece ones, like we're getting to the point where it's so integrated and easy. You can just you already have your headphones in, you have your phone in your pocket, and you can ask it to do something for you. Like if you whatever, like you said, like lawyer near me,
Yeah.
or like now even with the Alexa side. And I'm curious if you know anything, because you're tied into the Shopify world. Maybe you've heard some news about something like being able to order on an Alexa. You can say like, order me more toilet paper or whatever, and it can do that for you. Do you know if there's any sort of e-commerce integration apps out there where you could do that for your own like little store, or like where maybe someone could get into the space like that?
That's interesting. I have not heard of that, and I'm assuming that's because Shopify hasn't released their own version of that Alexa product, because Amazon's always going to drive you back to
Mm.
their marketplace, basically.
Of
So
course, Alexa. Yeah.
yeah, but so I don't know. That's a really really good question. I feel like Shopify will have to integrate and get some sort of like standard within that world, because you're supporting smaller businesses. I mean, there's obviously really big merchants and things like that on Shopify, but you're still majority of the time you're supporting individual like businesses. You're not supporting like multi-million dollar IPO companies or something like that. So yeah, I feel like that's a really good point. I haven't heard of anything like that where it'll take you, it's almost like a filter search, like, okay, we found socks, but which one of these companies are actually like has this technology piece of like Shopify in there or something like
Yeah. It'd be much more complicated and a bigger problem to solve. Amazon's got the advantage
that.
for
Yeah,
sure.
they
It's
do.
just
Yeah, they take.
it's Shopify is like, I mean, it's like the competitor in the sense, right? That I think
Yeah,
of when I think of Amazon, I think of like who's like the not anti Amazon, but
yeah.
like the antithesis, like the little guy, the million little guys is the Shopify side. But yeah, it's something where lots of opportunity for somebody to develop something too, right?
Yeah.
There's all these incredible app creators and people on that. There's a whole other realm of marketplace on. And I think you maybe even have. Do you, I know you've created a couple product businesses or like apps as well. Are any of them Shopify specific, or is I know like one of them there's a tool one? Is anything else
Um,
related to that?
Yeah, we had one app that we released a little bit over a year ago. Basically, what it was during the pandemic, and we had been building this app to influence people who were just starting their businesses to keep going. So what we were able to do is we can say, if let's say you were selling like the screen cleaner type of thing, and you're like, okay, this is a new product, I want to sell 10 of these this month, for example. That was your goal, like, I just want to sell 10 of these. What we can do is we can tie a product to a goal, and we can say, okay, here's the things that you need to do in order to get those 10 sales. Go post more on Twitter, go on LinkedIn, go do this,
Mm.
go write a blog post about it, go do these things. These are all like components that are going to get more clients. Go do an ad, like go run an ad. You might have to spend some money, but here's kind of the organic things that you can do. And so yeah, that was a really really interesting thing. And I don't know if you had a chance on your iPhone. When you get a chance, go download a app called Streaks. It's called streaks.app. And basically what it is, Nathan, is that you can set up, like, for example, you and I are both kind of working on this like personal brand piece, and a lot of writing and things like that. And when I was doing my writing cohort, I set this up where it doesn't let you miss a day of doing something. So
Mm.
you set a goal and you say, every day I want to do this thing once a day. Whether it's like go outside and do jumping jacks, or go get a coffee, or whatever that thing is that's going to move you forward. And I kind of wanted to bring that sort of aspect and like user interface into the Shopify space, because I felt like that was
Mm.
very powerful, because it worked for me, honestly. Like 30 out of 30 days I shipped writing, whether it was good or bad or ugly and great. I was like, I'm on a streak. Like, that's all I really care about, is getting shit done and getting it out and deploying it. And everything after that was just another task. Like we just, okay, now we got to go promote it. We got to go do this. So that was always really interesting. And so when I saw that happen, I was like, there's something here where we've already touched a little bit of that, with our app, but I feel like there's a different component that we can actually like parlay into where we can say, hey, you can set up these goals and text people and be like, hey, your goals, like you're supposed to get your goal done by tomorrow. What have you done to sell like another one of these so you can hit your goal, and
Mm.
like really do that follow up mechanism. So because there's a lot of people who start a store and they're just kind of sitting there. It's like, just because you build it, they won't come type of thing. You know what I mean? Like you have to do some stuff. You have to go on Twitter. You have to advertise. So yeah, there's a lot of things there. But that was one of the main ones. And Shopify actually reached out to us and they were like, we're going to promote this. This is a great idea, especially during the
Oh,
pandemic.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that was cool, and we got like, I don't know, like over 100 users or like 100 stores or 120 stores to like install it within like 2 days. Like it was pretty
Oh,
insane.
wow.
Their distribution on that platform is crazy, but yeah, it was good, man. But yeah, I love seeing small businesses win, man. That's been always like my big thing, and that's I think where I find my passion within the agency is that like I really love seeing like us do something for a client and then them just like eating it up, man, like loving it. It's making them extra money. Like we had a client recently, we integrated this like whole like quiz process for them and like, filtered down their customers because they have like a really interesting like product, but they have a lot of it and a lot of people, it's a very heavy product. It's a knife company and they do like knife sharpeners on a
Mm.
commercial level. And dude, they just had this problem where these pieces are like 80 pounds and you're paying like $400 for shipping, and so they sometimes had to like literally eat the cost because it wasn't the right thing that
Oh,
somebody would order. So they're just like, dude, we're just eating, like we're burning money into the ground. Luckily some of these products we can resell because they haven't been used or damaged, but some of them are not, and then we have to send it back and all these other things. And we put this quiz into place and it was a lot of work. And dude, not only did they increase like their average order value, but their support ticket system just was like basically down to
wow.
nothing because we already took that person through that process. And the product, when you look at it, it's like a little overwhelming. You're like, what is that machinery right there? But then once you get into it and you start to like, oh, okay, I use it 15 times a day. I'm using the like, oh, okay, let me bring you down to the actual like three products that you're really looking about. Don't worry about all the other noise that's out
Yeah, I love the quiz as an enabler because we used one for Cup and Leaf, or the business that was built,
there.
but also to like you look at some of the biggest, most fiercely competitive spaces in e-commerce, like mattresses in a box. So
Yeah.
like the people that sell like the Casper and that. When you go to those websites, a lot of them they'll be able to you can like take a quiz. Like I know for Helix, it's like, are you a side sleeper or a back sleeper, or do you
Hmm.
whatever, do you prefer firm or soft? Do you sleep with somebody else? Are you a hot sleeper or cold? And you answer these questions because it's the same thing. It's like this overwhelming, like, it's especially for these things, they sound expensive and heavy, and you're going to make a purchase. And if somebody can like kind of guide you towards, it's like the paralyzation of like having all the choices in the world. It's harder to make a decision. But if we can narrow it down to like, you want either this model or this model, or this is the one that you need, it makes it so much easier for somebody to like pull the trigger, make a decision, and like go ahead with it and feel good about it. And that's probably like you're saying, the support ticket stuff goes down because like they actually bought what they wanted. I wanted to
But
ask like
to
one
the
last
point,
question
to the
too.
point
Just
of to the
oh,
point
go
of
ahead.
that though, I was just going to add. I had actually a really good call when Octane, which is the quiz company on top of Shopify, when they like released that. I had a good call with their CEO, and he put it. His name is Matt, really cool guy. Him and Ben are like the presidents over there, and they're like really awesome. And they explained it perfectly, man. They were just like, think about your experience when you walk into like let's take like a Gucci store or a Louis Vuitton store. Like, what happens? The person asks you a couple of questions, like, okay, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a bag? Are you looking for a wallet? Like, what is your budget? What are you looking to spend? Let me show. Like, so you're creating that experience online in a way, like you're giving people that rundown so that they can go to the aisle where they like. I don't want to be in the banana aisle when I'm looking for medicine. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I don't need to look at bananas right now. I just need my medicine, or I don't need my medicine. I just want my fucking bananas, like one or the other. Like, don't give me both of them because I
yeah.
don't need them. So that I just wanted to add that because I thought that was a really good like a psychological way of looking at it. Is that you just kind of are you're bringing the retail aspect of human interaction into a quiz format that allows you to filter down to what you actually need.
The banana medicine thing is such a funny comparison, but it's so true because you can I've done it. You can spend an hour comparing bananas, and like all you really needed was medicine the whole time, right? You needed to go pick up some Tylenol. You're
Exactly.
like, I've been looking at like two things I don't need, and like should have just been looking at the other one.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask one last question, more like personal question
Yeah.
about like personal, not really personal brand, but just yourself in the sense that um, as far as things that you insert or have in your life that are like important elements outside of the work stuff. So I'm thinking like exercise, diet,
Yeah.
meditation. If there's anything that like, or maybe a couple things that you have as like sort of non-negotiables that you fit into either your day or your week. I'm just always curious what it is that you put up on the pedestal.
Yeah, yeah, there's a couple things. So, my dog is my son, so I always have to, like, be with him. I have to walk him. That's like my, and that, for most people that have animals, that's probably true. But like, it's one of those things. Like, he's the reason why I'm not sitting behind a computer for 24 hours. You know what I mean? Like, I get a break in my day where I can actually go and do things. So that's like one. Another one is cooking. I try to cook at least like
Mm.
4 to 5 days out of the week. I absolutely love like my girlfriend. She, works in a company and she has like a hybrid schedule. I absolutely love just being able to make food and for her to get home and just like us having dinner. Like that time, like in the morning, same thing. She just started getting on a schedule where she's waking up earlier, like waking up in the morning and having like half an hour, 15 minutes, an hour even, just to sit there and talk and not have our phones, not be like, I mean, granted, there's some days where it's like just things start off crazy. You get a message or, it happens. But one thing that we always try to do, it's like, let's have this time be for ourselves. Like, let's find a little bit of time to ease into the day than to just like wake up and be like, oh, I'm on my phone. Like, so there's a lot of that. I've actually recently also started playing pickleball a lot. Have you played pickleball yet?
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
pickleball is amazing. So that's been like a really big part of it because I don't play soccer anymore. I had a pretty bad injury, so I switched over to pickleball, and I try to do that like 3 times a week, sometimes more if I can. But there's some of those components where I every day need to do at least one of those to keep my balance across the week because it does get a little bit, I do get a little bit congested. And I think for me now, one of the big non-negotiables every day is writing, whether it's like,
Mm.
a paragraph or a long form essay or whatever it is. And even if it gets posted or I like repurpose some of it for like social media content, whatever it is, that's become like a really good, like brain dump. And then the last one is just going to therapy, man. Like I've been going to therapy. I've been seeing a therapist for like 2 years. And that to me is, I think one of the things I can recommend to absolutely every person, even when you don't feel like you have anything to talk to a therapist about. There's always something to talk to a therapist about, and I'm getting a lot more comfortable with leaning into the uncomfortable and really going against the grain of like what I want to talk about versus like some of the stuff that you don't necessarily think that you want to talk about it till you open up the can of worms and you're like, oh man, this is where it stems from. Oh, okay, like this is how. So it helps me work through stuff. It lets me kind of like, it gives me ideas to like be able to connect with other people as well and be like, oh, I just learned this in therapy. That's why this person's doing that. Like, let me reach out to them and be like, hey, man, like, I went through that same exact thing and this is how I dealt with it. Maybe it works for you. It doesn't work for you. It's okay. But here's maybe one solution that you could just put on your board. So those are kind of like, it's a little bit of everything, but a lot of those things fall into at least one day. It's each one of those things.
Nice.
How about
I
you?
have two dogs. So yeah, I say I got the two dogs. The dogs are the greatest excuse for all sorts of things, right?
Everything,
Like,
everything.
um, they make you get out there too, and just like it's you never have a day where you didn't go for a walk. Basically, I have a
Yep,
golden retriever and I have a mixed breed rescue from Mexico, and they always taking them out for a walk. I live somewhere there's beautiful places to go,
yep,
so it's nice to do that. Um, I like to try and exercise in the mornings, usually 3 to 4 days a week at the gym, and then on the weekends, I really like to get out and hike. So I live in a place where hiking is actively available, and it's there's mountains and lakes and all sorts of stuff to go out. So like the other day, actually, I'm so lucky on a Tuesday. I went and did a 17 kilometer for the Americans, like a 12-mile hike just on a Tuesday afternoon after work with my brother. So it's really nice to be able to get out and do those types of things, and I feel like great stress reliever. Just good time to reset, put the
yep.
phone away, not worry about really what's going on for a little while. Take the dog, and then it's funny you mentioned the therapy thing because I tried therapy. I went to 2 sessions, maybe about a year and a half ago, of individual therapy, and I tried doing it online, and it didn't really click. I didn't give it enough of a try. But then recently, about a month or 2 months ago now, my partner and I, we started going to a couples therapy. And again, like you're saying, not because there's anything wrong, but more so because just because you feel like there's nothing wrong, once you sit down with the therapist and you start talking and you're there for an hour, and like there's always like something that comes up. And for us, what's been really helpful with having two people is you you'll hear, you'll say something to them, and then they'll respond, and the therapist will be like, did you notice what you just did?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't notice anything. And they're like, oh, well, this is what you did. And then you're like, oh my God, like, do I do this all the time? And like you said, it just like all of a sudden you can be like, wow. And then they laid out a really interesting way of like bringing up certain questions and things, like where you'd say, oh, I feel this way. If you could do this for me, like that's my request. They basically set up like a way to say how something is impacting you, how you feel about it, how you can ask a question, make a request for them clearly, what you want them to do. So it's been really good, just like, brushing up on the relationship, making sure that things run smoothly. I think therapy is something that almost anyone can benefit from, and I agree. I would encourage everyone to give it a shot, even if the scariest part is going and starting.
Exactly.
Like you said, leaning into some of the uncomfortable feelings of. I'm definitely apprehensive every time, like I see it coming up. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna like, it's good when you do it.
I'm gonna quickly read you a quote. One of my really, really good friends from LA. I told him, because him and I, when I lived in LA, we used to have these like, one-on-one sessions at my house, and like sit in a couch and you just start talking about same thing like you would do with the therapist. And my one of my really good conversations with him is I was like, hey man, since I left LA, we don't have our therapy sessions at my apartment. I've been seeing a therapist for the past year and a half, and it's been awesome and really helpful. And he goes, oh, that's cool. Lean into the uncomfortable feelings with therapy. Good job. And I was like, yeah, I brought up some of the awesome quotes that stuck with me. And he goes, quotes help me condense larger issues. It's like fast food for emotional stuff. And I was like, mind blown. I was like, you just literally described exactly how my brain works. It's like, I don't like this like long thing where you explain to just give me a quote and let me digest it so that I can get the whole scope of it within like 3 words. It's again, it's that attention span thing that we have now because of all social media. But that to me was like, it's like fast food for emotional stuff. And I was like, absolutely, dude. So that was like really, really cool. But yeah, man, this was awesome. Thank you so much for talking about all these things. Thanks for letting me into your world and everything that you've got going on. And I highly encourage, man, just keep doing what you're doing, especially on LinkedIn. I'm doing the same exact thing. I'm trying to get better every single day. I'm trying to give people as much, content and share my experiences and things that I've learned and I fucked up on and all these other things. I think that's really important. I think we're in a world where it's easier to share information. And so I just want to, I'm rooting for you, man. I hope you continue building that brand and do whatever you decide you want to do and keep going down that road, man. I think it's awesome.
Thanks, man. It's been great getting to know you a little better and have a nice long chat here.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me into your brain to see what's in there and poking around. And we'll see each other on the socials and hopefully again on another call one day in the future. So it's looking forward to it, and stay in touch, man. It's been great talking.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Nathan. Well, you made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning into What is My Brain podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some value out of it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button to get notified when new episodes are live. I'm out. Thank you.